Okay, so welcome again to part 3 of Algebra, paper 1. I'm still looking at paper 1 concept, but this time I want to show you how to carry out factorization of a trinomial. So a trinomial, as you may call it, a quadratic function, it's in the form, ax raised to the power 2 plus bx plus c. So when you find such an expression, we simply call it as being a trinomial. Of course, as you call it, a quadratic, function, so to say. So that is what we are calling as being a trinomial. So in most cases, when you look at, that expression that you have, the coefficient, so you need to remember that you do have the coefficient. When I say coefficient, I mean the number in front of. So the coefficient of x squared, what number is in front of x squared? In this case, we're using letters. So what letter is in front of x squared? It is simply a. And we can also try to identify the coefficient of x. What is the letter in front of that? So now when you're identifying, you're picking up, please, you need to also pick up the sign in front. So it is simply a positive b, especially when it is a negative. It is important because students love to miss that and they get the expression wrong. Then what about the c? Well, we can simply call a constant. So we also have a constant. A constant is just a number that we have. So a constant in this case is the c that we have in the expression. For example, if a person has got 2x squared minus 7, x, maybe let's say minus 5. This is what we are calling as being a trinomial. So you can identify what is your a, your b, and what is your c. These are simply coefficients. So from here, what is my a? That's what I want to identify. What is my b and what is my c? So my a, remember a is the coefficient, the expression, the number in front or the letter in front of the one having squared. So the one having squared, what number do you have? It's a 2. So that is representing your a. What is your b? Your b in this case is the number in front of x, which is a negative 7. And what is your c? A constant. It is simply a negative 5. So that's the way you can identify it. Suppose I have x squared minus, plus 2x minus 5. Then how is that going to be? We can simply say even minus 8 is okay there. So what is my a, my b, my c there? So in this case, your a, what is the number in front of the one having a square? Here, what number is there? There's a 1. Your b is simply the number in front, the coefficient of x, which is a positive 2. And what's your c? It's a negative 8. So this is the way you can actually identify that. Now, when we are solving a trinomial, we normally say the product. In this case, the product will represent it by p, then the sum represented by s, and we also talk about the factors. On one I called it as being the PSF, factors that we are talking about. So how do we get the product? Well, product means you multiply, and sum means you add. That's the whole idea. So how do you get the product? Well, you get the product by multiplying a and c. So a multiplied by c, that gives you the product. So the value of a is 2 times the value of c, negative 5. So in this case, if I look at my PSF, if I look at my product, it will be 2 times negative 5, which is negative 10. Then how do you get the sum? The sum is the one representing b. So the expression that is having your b, that is your sum. In this case, my sum is just negative 7. So f is representing factors. So you need to look for 2 factors. When you multiply, they'll give you the product. When you add, they'll give you the sum. But of course, don't worry, I was just using these questions randomly. I'll show you in just a short while. So here, product, sum. What's the product? It's 1 times negative 8, which is negative 8. The sum, which is, b, which is a 2. Of course, you need to look for factors. So let me use typical examples because these I was just using any other values. I wanted you to have an idea. So with me, I've got 3 questions. So I'm going to do the 2 questions, then I'll leave the last one for you to practice. For example, it says factorize completely, and that's the way it is going to be coming in your paper 1. So they have given you 2x squared minus 7x plus 5, and they tell you to factorize. First of all, start by identifying what is your a, the coefficient, which is a 2, your b that's negative 7, and your c, which is a 5. So remember, product, sum, and factor. So what's the product? 2 times 5, which is a 10, and my factor is negative 7. So the key concept is that you are going to be looking for two numbers. When you multiply those two numbers to give you the product, but when you add the same numbers, you are going to have the sum of negative 7. So each time you should look for all the numbers that give you the product. Out of those, there will be numbers that will, when you add, will give you the sum of negative 7. For example, I can simply talk about maybe 5. I can simply talk about maybe, 5 and a 2. In this case, maybe both of them are going to have a negative. Negative 5 times negative 2 is a positive 10. But when I add same signs, it will give me negative 7. So now the idea is, why are we getting these factors? It is because we want to expand the middle term. We are just expanding the middle term so that we can have 4 terms and use, the grouping of terms to factorize. That's the idea. So because they're using letter x, you can write these factors in terms of x. So that would be negative 5x, and that would be negative 2x. So now let me show you how you go about it. So you are going to get the first term, which is 2x squared. Then the middle term, this middle term, negative 7x, will be replaced by this factor. So it is going to be, you can start with it, whichever you need, because there's a 2. Let me start with that, 2x minus 5x. So this has just substituted the middle term, but negative 2x minus 5x will still give me negative 7. Then again, you bring in the last term there, which is a positive 5. Then remember, you have 1, 2, 3, 4. You can use now that you can now group the terms and factorize. I believe you watched my previous video. You are familiar with that. What is common there is a 2 and x. When I divide there 2 and x, I'll remain with just x. There, I'll remain with just 1. There, when you have the negative sign, move it out. What is common? There's also a 5. So you are going to start dividing negative 5. Negative and negative is positive. 5 into 5 is 1, so I'll just remain with x. Please don't write 1x. There's nothing like that in the kingdom of mathematics. The world of mathematics doesn't have that. Positive and negative is a negative. 5 into 5 is a 1. You can see what is in the bracket should be the same. So group what is outside. It will be 2x minus 5. And pick up one of the bracket because they are the same, x minus 1. It simply means you have factorized that. So that's the key concept of how you can go about that. Well, let me do my last question. Like I said, for part C, that is yours. You can actually get to practice that. B says that x squared minus 4x plus 3. So what is our A there? It is 1. The coefficient, the number in front of x squared is 1. My B, the coefficient of x is a negative 4. Don't say 4, it's a negative 4. And your C is a positive 3. So product, sum, and factor. So the product 1 times 3 is a 3. The sum is simply negative 4. You get the B part. So what are two factors? When I multiply, they'll give me positive 4. When I add, they'll give me, a negative 4. So you can have a 3 and a 1, but both of them are going to be negative. Negative 3 and negative 1. Negative and negative will give you positive. So therefore, when you add this, you are going to have negative 4. So write this in terms of the letter they are using, which is x there. So it will be negative 3x. Negative, you don't write negative 1x. This is wrong. You just say, if it is 1, just write negative x. That's the way you do it. Remember, the idea is we want to replace the middle term. We expand it so that we can have 4 terms. So you bring the first term, you bring it the way it is, which is x squared. Then the middle term, negative 4x, will be replaced by these factors there. So I can simply say maybe minus x minus 3x. Then the last term, you bring the last term, which is a positive 3. Then you group them and you factorize. What is common there is x. When I divide x there, I'll remain with just x. When I divide x there, I'll remain with 1. Remember this sign out, negative. What is common? 3. So therefore, what is common is negative 3. So divide negative 3 to know what will remain. Negative and negative is positive. 3 into 3 is 1, so I'll remain with x. Negative and positive is a negative. 3 into 3 is a 1. Remember, each time what is in the bracket should be the same. If they are not the same, there's something wrong with what you are doing. So put what is outside the bracket, group them together. So x minus 3. Then we can also get the bracket 1 of the bracket because they are the same. It simply means we have factorized. So that's the way you can factorize, by using trinomials, using the product, sum, and factor. Of course, you are going to understand that others can also use the quadratic formula for these ones, which later on I'll teach you. X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. It is possible. You can also come up with the factors quickly if you want for that one. It's possible in case you're struggling with the factors. Please, you can try out part C. Thank you so much for watching. So in my next videos, I'll talk about algebra, now concept that come in your paper 2, mathematics for examination council of Zambia. Thank you so much for watching.